The girl says to the billionaire, "Hi, sir, why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" A quiet morning at Rosewood Cafe, where the rhythmic patter of autumn rain against the windows creates an almost soothing backdrop. 16-year-old Emma Parker is balancing trays of steaming coffee cups with practiced precision, her chestnut hair tucked behind her ear as she navigates the narrow spaces between tables. Life hasn't been easy for Emma. Her mother's medical bills are piling up, and every tip counts. But today, something extraordinary happens that will change everything. A man walks in, a billionaire CEO named Alexander Blackwood, and when his wallet accidentally falls to the floor, revealing a photograph of Emma's mother, the world as Emma knows it begins to unravel. The cafe goes silent. Everyone seems frozen in place, including Emma, who now holds the small photograph in trembling fingers. It's unmistakable. The woman in the picture is her mother, Catherine Parker. The resemblance is uncanny, from the warm brown eyes to the gentle curve of the smile. And yet, how could this stranger possibly have her mother's photo? With a voice barely above a whisper, Emma asks the question burning in her mind. "Hi, sir. Why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" These words hang heavy in the air, carrying decades of secrets, regrets, and unanswered questions. Alexander Blackwood, a man known for commanding empires and exuding confidence, suddenly looks lost for words. His carefully controlled demeanor cracks under the weight of Emma's innocent but piercing inquiry. For perhaps the first time in his life, he appears vulnerable, his gaze shifting between the photograph and Emma's face. The resemblance is undeniable. It's not just the physical traits, but also the intensity in her eyes that mirrors his own. As the truth begins to dawn on him, so does the realization that the past he thought was buried has come back to haunt him in the most unexpected way. Emma, meanwhile, feels like she's stepped into someone else's life. Her entire existence has been built around the idea that it's always been just her and her mother against the world. Catherine raised her, alone, working multiple jobs, and never speaking about Emma's father, except to say he wasn't in the picture. Now, here stands this man, a towering figure of wealth and power, who clearly had some kind of connection with her mother. What did it mean? Was he her father? Did her mother know he was still around? Or worse, had she kept this secret deliberately? The scene unfolds. We're introduced to two central characters whose lives couldn't be more different. On one side, there's Emma, a hard-working teenager, juggling school and work, shouldering responsibilities far beyond her years. She's resilient, curious, and deeply protective of her mother. Then there's Alexander, a man haunted by choices made long ago, driven by guilt and regret. Despite his immense success, he carries a void inside him, one that no amount of money or power can fill. Their meeting isn't just coincidental. It's destiny knocking at their door, forcing them to confront truths they've both avoided for too long. But what makes this story truly compelling isn't just the mystery surrounding the photograph. It's the emotional depth beneath the surface, the themes of family, identity, and second chances. Emma's discovery sets off a chain reaction, unraveling years of silence and half-truths. We see glimpses of her mother's struggles, her sacrifices, and the pain of raising a child alone while battling illness. At the same time, we witness Alexander grappling with his own demons, torn between his duty to his company and his longing for redemption. Both characters are flawed, relatable, and achingly human, making their journey all the more gripping. The tension builds as Emma decides to hear Alexander out, leading to a private conversation in the cafe's back room. Here, amidst the hum of distant chatter, and the relentless drumming of rain outside, Alexander reveals fragments of his past. He talks about meeting Catherine in university, their 3-year relationship, and the cruel ultimatum issued by his father. "I was young and foolish," he admits, his voice tinged with regret. "I chose the company over love, thinking I could save both. But nothing, not the billions, not the accolades, has ever filled the void of leaving her." Yet, even as Alexander lays bare his soul, new questions arise. Why did Catherine never tell Emma about him? Did she know he lived in the same town, building his empire just blocks away? And most importantly, does she want anything to do with him now? The stakes grow higher when Emma reveals her mother's condition, a rare form of lymphoma requiring expensive treatment. This revelation adds urgency to the unfolding drama, pushing Alexander to offer help despite the unresolved tensions between them. By the end of this introduction, the audience is left teetering on the edge of their seats. Will Catherine accept Alexander's help? Does she harbor resentment toward him? Or does she still feel something deeper? And what about Emma? How will she navigate this newfound connection with a man who might be her father, but remains a stranger in many ways? The unresolved tension crackles like electricity, drawing viewers into the heart of the story. What started as a simple question, "Why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" has spiraled into a web of emotions, choices, and consequences. It's a tale of love lost and found, of sacrifices made and bridges rebuilt. As the rain continues to fall outside the cafe, washing away the grime of the streets, it symbolizes the cleansing of old wounds and the promise of new beginnings. But whether these characters can truly find healing together remains to be seen. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where the answers begin to unfold, and the bonds of family are tested like never before. As Emma stood frozen by the cafe door, clutching Alexander Blackwood's business card like it might burn her fingers, she couldn't shake the feeling that her world had just tilted on its axis. The rain outside seemed heavier now, as if the sky itself was mirroring the storm brewing. Inside her, how could this man, a stranger who commanded skyscrapers and boardrooms, be connected to her mother? And why had Catherine Parker kept this secret for so long? Every unanswered question felt like a thread pulling at the fabric of Emma's life, unraveling everything she thought she knew about her family. The next morning, Emma walked into this hospital corridor with a knot in her stomach. Her mother's treatment was scheduled for later that day, but Emma's mind wasn't focused on the medical details. Instead, she replayed the conversation with Alexander over and over again. His words haunted her. "I never knew about you." Could it really be true? Had his father manipulated both him and Catherine, keeping them apart all these years? Or was there more to the story? As much as Emma wanted to believe Alexander, trust didn't come easily, not when the stakes were this high. When Emma entered her mother's room, she found Catherine sitting up in bed, her fragile frame wrapped in a hospital gown. Despite the illness that had stolen so much from her, Catherine still carried an air of quiet strength. She greeted Emma with a smile, though the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "How are you holding up?" Emma hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject. She set down the flowers she'd brought and took a seat beside her mother, searching for the right words. Finally, she pulled out the business card and placed it on the bedside table. "Mom," she began carefully, "something happened yesterday. At the cafe." Catherine's expression shifted slightly, curiosity flickering across her face. "What is it, Emma?" "It's complicated." Emma swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "A man came in. Alexander Blackwood. Do you know him?" For a moment, Catherine's face remained blank. unreadable. Then slowly, recognition dawned, and with it, a wave of emotion that made her shoulders sag. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He was here," Emma nodded, watching her mother closely. "He had your picture in his wallet, Mom. A picture of you from back in the day. He says he didn't know about me. Is that true?" Catherine closed her eyes briefly, as if bracing herself for what was to come. When she opened them again, they shimmered with unshed tears. "It's not that simple, Emma. There's so much you don't know." And so, piece by painful piece, Catherine began to share her side of the story. She spoke of meeting Alexander at university, of falling in love with a man who seemed to understand her dreams and fears better than anyone else ever had. But she also recounted the heartbreak that followed, the ultimatum issued by Alexander's father, the threats, the lies. "His father told me Alex had moved on," Catherine explained, her voice thick with emotion, "that he wanted nothing to do with me or any child I might have. I believed him, Emma. I was young and scared and alone." Emma listened in stunned silence, her heart breaking for the mother who had sacrificed so much. "But you tried to reach out," she said, finally, piecing together what Alexander had told her. "You sent a letter with my picture." Catherine nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "It came back unopened. I didn't know what else to do. So I built a life for us, just the two of us. I didn't think Alex would ever care to find us." The revelation hit Emma like a punch to the gut. All these years, her mother had carried the weight of abandonment, not knowing that Alexander had been searching for them too, only to be thwarted at every turn. The injustice of it all burned inside her, fueling a mix of anger and desperation. If their separation had been orchestrated by someone else, then maybe there was still hope for reconciliation. Maybe Alexander truly did want to make things right. But even as Emma considered this possibility, doubts lingered. What if Alexander's sudden appearance wasn't about love or redemption, but guilt? What if he saw helping Catherine as a way to ease his conscience, without committing to being a real part of their lives? These questions gnawed at her, making it impossible to fully trust him. Meanwhile, Alexander wrestled with his own turmoil. Back at his office, he stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse suite. The city sprawled below him like a glittering chessboard. For years, he had prided himself on his ability to control every aspect of his life, his company, his reputation, his legacy. Yet now, faced with the daughter he never knew existed and the woman he had loved and lost, he felt utterly powerless. The photograph of Catherine, tucked safely in his wallet, mocked him, a reminder of the choices he had made, or rather, the ones that had been forced upon him. Alexander's assistant, Monsieur Reynolds, knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside. "Sir," she said cautiously, "your 3 o'clock meeting is waiting." He waved her off distractedly. "Reschedule it." His mind was elsewhere, consumed by thoughts of Catherine and Emma. He needed answers, clarity, closure, but most of all, he needed a chance to prove himself, to show them that he wasn't the same reckless, selfish man he had been at 22, that he could be the father Emma deserved and the partner Catherine once believed in. By the time Alexander arrived at the hospital later that evening, tensions were running high. Catherine sat stiffly on the edge of her bed, her arms crossed defensively, while Emma hovered nearby, torn between protecting her mother and giving Alexander a fair shot. The air in the room crackled with unspoken emotions, each word hanging precariously between them. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Alexander began, his tone measured but sincere. "I just want to help, whatever it takes." Catherine studied him for a long moment, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Help isn't free, Alex. Not even from you. It doesn't have to be charity, he countered quickly. Think of it as restitution for lost time. Emma watched the exchange, her heart pounding. This was the crux of it, the moment where everything would either fall apart or begin to heal. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Mom, we can't keep doing this alone. We're drowning. If he wants to help, maybe we should let him. Catherine hesitated, her defenses wavering. It was clear she didn't want to rely on anyone, least of all the man who had broken her heart. But as she glanced at Emma, seeing the exhaustion etched into her daughter's face, something shifted. Pride warred with practicality. Love battled fear, and finally, reluctantly, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly, her voice laced with resignation. But on one condition, no strings attached. You walk away whenever we say so. Alexander exhaled sharply, relief washing over him. Thank you, he murmured, his voice thick with gratitude. You won't regret this. As the days turned into weeks, the three of them navigated the delicate dance of rebuilding trust. Alexander threw himself into ensuring Catherine received the best care possible, arranging for her transfer to the prestigious Mayfield Clinic and personally overseeing her treatment plan. Meanwhile, Emma found herself caught between loyalty to her mother and curiosity about the man who claimed to be her father. Slowly, tentatively, bonds began to form. Shared meals in the hospital cafeteria, late-night conversations about books and music, moments of laughter that felt almost normal. Yet, beneath the surface, unresolved tensions simmered. Catherine struggled with feelings of vulnerability, terrified of letting Alexander back into her life, only to lose him again. Emma grappled with conflicting emotions, torn between wanting to embrace this newfound connection and fearing it might all disappear. And Alexander, for all his wealth and power, faced the daunting task of proving himself worthy of their forgiveness. The climax approached during one particularly tense evening at the hospital. Catherine's latest round of treatment had left her weak and frustrated, her progress slower than expected. As Emma helped her settle into bed, Alexander arrived bearing news, good news he hoped. The doctors at Mayfield had identified a new, experimental therapy that showed promise for patients like Catherine. We need to act fast, he urged, his tone urgent yet gentle. This could be our best shot. But instead of gratitude, Catherine erupted in anger. Don't you get it, Alex? I'm tired of being your project. Tired of feeling like some puzzle you're trying to solve. Her words hung in the air, raw and cutting. Emma flinched, caught in the crossfire, while Alexander stood frozen, visibly shaken. For a moment, it seemed like everything they had worked toward might collapse. Then, softly, Emma spoke up. Mom, he's trying. Can't you see that? He's not perfect, but neither are we. Maybe it's time to stop punishing him and ourselves for things we can't change. Catherine looked at her daughter, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she realized how much Emma had grown, how strong and wise she had become, despite everything they had endured. With a shaky breath, she turned to Alexander. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's do it. But promise me one thing. Anything, he replied instantly. That you'll stay, no matter what happens next. Alexander nodded, his eyes glistening. I promise. And with that fragile vow, the stage was set for the final chapter of their journey. A reckoning with the past, a leap of faith into the future, and the hope that love could conquer even the deepest wounds. As Catherine leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder, the rooftop garden bathed in golden spring sunlight, Emma couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. Just 6 months ago, their lives were fractured, secrets buried, trust broken, and hope nearly extinguished. Now, sitting together as a family for the first time, it felt like the universe had conspired to bring them back to each other. But, even in this moment of peace, there was an unspoken tension lingering in the air. Alexander cleared his throat, breaking the serene silence. "Catherine," he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes widened, and she glanced between her parents, realizing what was about to happen. This wasn't just any conversation. It was the culmination of months of healing, forgiveness, and rediscovery. Catherine turned to face him, her expression softening as she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. "Alex," she said gently, "you don't have to rush this." "I'm not rushing," he replied, opening the box to reveal a delicate diamond ring. "I've waited 17 years to do this properly. Catherine Parker, will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for lost time? Will you marry me?" Emma held her breath, watching her mother's reaction. For a moment, Catherine simply stared at the ring, her emotions playing across her face, like clouds shifting in the sky. Then, slowly, a smile broke through, warm and radiant. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "Yes, Alex, I'd like that very much." The relief on Alexander's face was palpable as he slipped the ring onto Catherine's finger. Emma clapped her hands over her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. It was surreal. This man who had once been a stranger was now officially part of their family. The weight of everything they had endured seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging none of them had dared to dream of before. But the journey hadn't been easy. Over the past 6 months, they had faced countless challenges. Not just Catherine's battle with cancer, but also the emotional scars left by years of separation. There were nights when Catherine cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by memories of the life she could have had with Alexander. There were days when Emma struggled to reconcile her anger toward him with the growing affection she felt for the father she never knew. And there were moments when Alexander doubted whether he deserved a second chance, haunted by the choices that had torn them apart in the first place. Yet, through it all, they had leaned on one another. Alexander proved himself, not just with words, but with actions. He attended every doctor's appointment, learned about Catherine's treatments, and supported Emma in ways both big and small. When Emma confided in him about her struggles balancing school and work, he encouraged her to focus on her studies, reminding her that she didn't need to carry the world on her shoulders anymore. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, brick by brick, until it became something solid enough to stand on. One of the most surprising developments came during a quiet evening at the hospital. Catherine, still weak from treatment, shared a story Emma had never heard before. "When I found out I was pregnant," she admitted, "I was terrified. I didn't know how I'd raise a child alone. But then, when I held you for the first time, Emma, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. You gave me strength. You gave me purpose." Hearing those words changed something in Emma. She had always known her mother was strong, but understanding the depth of her sacrifices made her appreciate their bond even more. It also helped her see Alexander in a new light, not as the man who abandoned them, but as someone who had been robbed of the chance to be part of their lives. Forgiveness didn't come overnight, but it came, bit by bit, until the wounds began to heal. Now, as they sat together on the rooftop garden, the future stretched out before them like an open road. Catherine's cancer was in remission, thanks to the cutting-edge treatment at the Mayfield Clinic. Emma had decided to accept Alexander's offer of financial support using the trust fund to focus on her education. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, inspired by the resilience she had witnessed in her mother and the compassion she hoped to emulate. For Alexander, the transformation was profound. The billionaire CEO, who once measured success in quarterly profits, now found fulfillment in simpler things, helping Catherine navigate recovery, cheering Emma on at her high school graduation, and learning to be present in ways he never thought possible. He often joked that he was retiring from being a workaholic. Though everyone knew he still ran Blackwood Enterprises with the same precision and dedication. The difference was that now his priorities had shifted. Family came first. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the rooftop, Emma stood up and stretched. "You know," she said with a grin, "if anyone had told me last fall that we'd end up here, I wouldn't have believed them." "Me neither," Catherine agreed, leaning into Alexander's embrace. "But sometimes life has a way of surprising us. And sometimes," Alexander added, looking at both of them with unmistakable pride, "it gives us exactly what we need, even if we didn't know we were missing it." Emma nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They weren't perfect. They never would be, but they were whole. Together, they had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged stronger because of it. As she looked out over the city skyline, she thought about the photograph that had started it all. That tiny piece of paper, tucked away in a wallet for 17 years, had set off a chain reaction that brought them back to each other. In the end, it wasn't wealth or power that mattered. It was love. Love that endured, despite years of silence. Love that forgave mistakes and embraced imperfections. Love that refused to give up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. And as Emma took her place between her parents, holding their hands tightly, she knew one thing for certain: no matter what the future held, they would face it together as a family.